Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Lyndall Curtis. The federal government has today announced it will spend $4 billion over 6 years on expanding publicly funded dental treatment. The plan, negotiated with the Greens, goes part of the way to the minor party's desire for a Medicare-style dental scheme. The increased means-tested funding will cover children, adults on low incomes and help build the capacity and workforce for dental. It will start in 2014 and is partly paid for by scrapping the Dean Dental program and partly replaces the chronic diseases dental program that the government had wanted to scrap. That program was started by Tony Abbott when he was Health Minister. Joining me to discuss the day are Labor MP Kelvin Thomson and Liberal Senator Matthias Coleman. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon, Matthias, Lyndall.
We'll go first to the announcement from the Health Minister and the reaction from the opposition.
We know that many low-income Australians miss out, and a number of those missing out are kids.
Well, this is another unfunded promise from Julia Gillard. I don't know where all the money is meant to be coming from.
Kelvin, Joe Hockey is right, isn't he, that the way this scheme will be funded has not yet been announced. Tanya Plibersek said savings will be made and we'll find out in the mid-year economic outlook, but doesn't it immediately raise the question of where the money is coming from?
Well, as the Minister says, the announcement about funding will be part of the mid-year economic outlook, but there's always been, in my mind, a very close link between good dental health and good health overall. So I think that it's prudent on the part of people to go and visit their dentists and prudent on the part of governments to encourage that and to make it affordable.
Matthias, your leader has said that Medicare funding of dental is an aspiration of his. Is this at least laying the groundwork for that for future governments, either Labor or the Coalition, to build on?
Well, Tony Abbott, as Health Minister, has actually delivered Medicare dental funding for people with chronic illness. I mean, with the Labor Party, they're always good at making promises. They know how to promise the world, but they're very bad when it comes to the delivery. What we want to know is, where is the money coming from? I mean, they're making one funding commitment after the other. Show us the money. But
you say Labor's good at promising but bad at delivering. Wasn't the problem with the chronic disease dental scheme that Tony Abbott brought in was that it blew out? It was costing about $1 billion a year, and if that funding continued, this scheme that the government's announced today would be cheaper.
Well, I mean, let the government explain that, because, I mean, the dental scheme that Tony Abbott introduced and implemented and delivered 17 million services to about 1 million patients across Australia. And
it cost $1 billion a year, substantially more than it was supposed to cost.
So is the government saying they're going to be spending less on dental care? Is that what the announcement is today?
No, because they're saying they'd already effectively scrapped that scheme because it was too expensive and in some cases was being rorted.
Well, the government didn't like it because it was very effective, because it was delivering actual services to actual people who were actually in need of those services. I mean, this is all about politics. What the government is doing is they're just repackaging, re-announcing, rebranding. It looks as if they're sort of making some additional commitments, but they're not telling us where the money is coming from. Until we actually can say how the government is going to fund it, we can't actually trust that this is going to be any different from previous promises the government has made, particularly in the health portfolio.
If we could leave aside the cost for a minute and focus on what this policy is aimed to do, Kelvin, is this hitting the right areas? Money for kids' dental treatment and money that is not capped going to those on lower incomes?
I think it is, Lyndall. When I was elected in 1996, the Howard government came to power and slashed the funding for public dental services, and after that I had pensioners coming to my office with serious cases of tooth decay and the like. So I'm really pleased to see that there is a focus on people on low incomes, on pensioners and other concession card holders, and that there is $1.3 billion being allocated to boost those public dental health services. As well as the focus on children, there will be provision through $2.7 billion for several million Australian children who are eligible via Family Tax Benefit A for treatments that will help improve the quality of their teeth. And we know that we are seeing higher levels of teeth decay, which are simply unacceptable in this day and age, that there will be support for them and improved dental health as a consequence.
Matthias, this scheme will start in 2014. It's a problem when you're looking particularly at the health space that it does take time to build the workforce, to build the capacity to be able to deliver these sorts of services, doesn't it?
Well, let me just reject the assertion just made by Kelvin Thomson up front. Like the Howard government didn't scrap a dental scheme. Paul Keating introduced a time-limited scheme which ran out. And of course, what Tony Abbott has done, he's actually introduced a proper Medicare dental scheme that was very well targeted at those people with chronic disease. Now,
but it wasn't well targeted in terms of it wasn't targeted in terms of being means tested. It was not means tested, was it?
It was targeted at those that had actually a demonstrated health need, like those with chronic disease, where there was a demonstrated health need to actually make a particular effort. But just to go back to your point before, it is quite right that the promise that was made today is a promise to deliver something after the next election. Now, I mean, wherever we look, the government has made many promises. I mean, Kevin Rudd, in the lead up to 2007, promised that he would fix public hospitals, and if he hadn't fixed them by the middle of 2009, he would take them over. Well, that was 3 years ago, and of course history shows that never happened. And I mean, there's promise after promise after promise. The Labor Party is always very good at making promises on the never, knowing that they're probably quite unlikely to ever have to be accountable for the promises that they've made today.
Well, we'll talk about that now. Kelvin, isn't it the case that with a lot of the government's promises in recent times, with the dental scheme, with the disability insurance scheme, which starts fully in 2018, even the asylum policies, increasing the humanitarian intake, the increased costs for offshore processing, and the response to the Gonski report on education funding, that there are significant spending promises being made at a time when it doesn't seem like you have the budget money to pay for them?
Well, you have to make the announcements ahead of the actual implementation date, because there need to be preparations made for the implementation. You have to get the regulatory regimes right, and you have to get people trained and skilled appropriately. So it is right to make the announcements ahead of the actual implementation date. But I do think it's really bold of Senator Cormann to be talking about where's the money coming from and the budget bottom line. The truth is that everything we've done to balance the books, like the minerals resource rent tax, like the changes to the private health insurance rebate, like the cuts to defence spending, all of those things have been opposed by the Liberal opposition.
Matthias, if we could just let Kelvin finish, please.
And we can now see exactly how the Liberal Party would seek to balance the books were they to become the government. They would seek to do it by slashing the salaries and jobs of public servants, slashing the entitlements of government contractors. You see Campbell Newman doing it in Queensland. You see Barry O'Farrell doing it in New South Wales. You see Ted Baillieu doing it in Victoria. We know this is the Liberal opposition strategy.
Matthias, there are significant promises on your side of politics too that you have not said how you fund. You're promising tax cuts and pension rises without a carbon tax, a broadband policy at less cost than the NBN but presumably at some cost, superannuation rises without the mining tax, reinstating the private health insurance rebate. So there's a question to be asked on your own side, isn't there? Where would you find the money?
Well, there absolutely is a question to be asked on our side, but we are not the government at the moment. We're the opposition, and in good time before the next election, when we know what the state of the budget is going to be, we will of course release our costings and release our alternative budget, so to speak, in the lead up to the next election. But you see, I mean, there's going to be one more budget from the government, all other things being equal, between now and the next election. If you look at the last financial year, the position of in the last financial year deteriorated by $34.4 billion from the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook to the budget that was delivered in May 2012. It went from $10 billion deficit, from a $10 billion deficit to a $44.4 billion deficit. So when I hear Kelvin Thomson talk about balancing the books, this Labor government has not delivered a single budget that was balanced. This government can't live within its means. It's delivered $174 billion worth of accumulated deficits. They clearly don't know how to balance the books. And here we are. They've got revenue write-downs because the commodity prices are going down, because the carbon tax floor price has been removed, and they've got spending commitment after spending commitment. I mean, how are they going to fund it?
If we could move on now to that question of the changes to the carbon price. Tony Abbott today has questioned yesterday's decision to link the scheme with the European emissions trading scheme.
We all know what a mess the Europeans have made of so much lately. The last people we want to be linking ourselves to at the moment are the Europeans.
Kelvin, your side of politics is being attacked by the opposition on both sides of this argument, saying that that prices might fall and that would hurt the budget, or that prices might rise and that would see consumer costs go up. Given that it seems the floor price was something the Greens wanted, should your ministers, your Prime Minister, have been less equivocal in support for the floor price and have said that this is an element that might change?
Well, frankly, Lyndall, they can't have it both ways in relation to this and claim that the price going down is a bad thing and that the price going up is a bad thing. The truth is that linking it to the internationally based emissions trading scheme is a good idea, something that we flagged quite some time ago, and it seems to me that it means that by 2015 we will have a market-based mechanism, so you can forget all this talk of a tax. You won't have any economist anywhere referring to an internationally linked emissions trading scheme based around a market mechanism as a tax. And it will also, and it can no longer be said that we are out ahead of the world, that somehow Australia is doing something that no one else is doing. You've heard the opposition claiming that this is the world's greatest or largest carbon tax. The truth is that you'll have the 27 countries of the EU plus countries like Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, other countries, South Korea, South Africa, Mexico, all of these countries embracing emissions trading, and we will be linked into the EU scheme.
Matthias, your colleagues have called this policy chaos and confusion, saying the policy's been changed after only 2 months. But isn't it the case that policies are often refined and changed? If you look at the example of the GST under John Howard, what he announced and what he could get through the Senate were two different things. And now he says it was a pity that the Labor Party and the Democrats didn't vote for a GST that included food. So changing policy is not a new thing, is it?
Well, it is policy chaos. I mean, this legislation has of course already passed the Parliament, and it's been in place for less than 2 months.
But the government always said it was going to negotiate other elements, didn't it?
Well, this is a fundamental change. I mean, the Parliament, legislated for the floor price. We said that was a bad idea. I mean, we think that the carbon tax is a bad idea. I mean, Kelvin says that we're trying to argue that the carbon tax going down is a bad thing and the carbon tax going up is a bad thing. Well, the only reason the carbon tax going down is a bad thing is because of the amount of promises and that the government has attached to it. Because the government has attached so much spending to the carbon tax revenue, the carbon tax going down is a bad thing for the fiscal balance. But the only way to fix this is to scrap the carbon tax altogether, because of course it will push up the cost of electricity, it will push up the cost of living and the cost of doing business without doing anything to help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. And of course,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Matthias, but we've run out of time. Matthias Cormann and Kelvin Thomson, thank you very much for your time today.
Good to talk with you, Lyndall.
Good to be here.
And thank you for joining Capitol Hill. Please be with us tomorrow.